This is episode 344 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined this week by Louie Sanchez. He is a candidate for New Mexico governor in 2022 as a Republican. Welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Louie.
Thank you, Paul, and I appreciate you having me in this morning.
Yeah, well, glad to have you in, and we've tried to reach out to candidates for governor, including the current governor, to have her on the show as well and find out what folks think needs to be done to improve our state. Now, before we get into all those kinds of things...
Yes. How long is this show?
Well, we'll talk to you for about 45 minutes, so get it ready. But before we do get into those solutions and the problems, let's talk a little bit about who you are and why you chose to run for governor in 2022.
Sure. So I am a native of New Mexico. Well, native. My parents brought me back here when I was 3 months old, and but my mother and father are from Albuquerque, born and raised here, and my father was in the Air Force, and so started life in a small little trailer down in the South Valley. It's right by the aquarium. Everybody who's ever been to the aquarium knows exactly where that little trailer park is, and started right there with had my brother and a sister, and we just live life like most normal Hispanics do. We were brought up the same way with a love of life, culture. We all are brought up to respect and love God, but we are all brought up with a incredible work ethic, and with knowledge that if we're willing to work really hard at and we're willing to put ourselves out there and not take excuses for failing, but pick ourselves up, that we can achieve anything in this world. So we started there, and I ended up going to the University of New Mexico as the first person in my family of, 48 cousins, 50 cousins, to actually put myself through college and graduate from college. And then at that point, I was actually working for Senator Domenici. I worked for him while I was in college, and then right out of college, I worked up in D.C. for him and decided to come back to New Mexico to seek my fortune. But the one cool thing about going to UNM is, and doing so many odd jobs while you're going to college is I used to wash dishes at sororities, because you figure out when you're poor how to eat. And if you wash dishes, then you knew you could eat lunch and dinner. And I actually met my wife while I was actually washing some of her dishes.
Wow. Well, she knows you're handy around the kitchen, so that's good.
Well, absolutely. And, the nice thing also is having so many jobs and growing up the way that I did. And I've laid drywall, landscaping. I've been a janitor, a line cook, a waiter, a bartender, like so many other New Mexicans. You find a way to survive, and you find a way just to build yourself up and try and reach the goals that you set for yourself.
All right. Well, did you work in the D.C. office with Domenici or stay here in one of his New Mexico offices?
I worked at both. So I worked at his office right there off Silver, and then I also worked up in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And then after being in D.C. for a while, I just knew that I wanted to come back to a state that I loved. And so I decided to come back to New Mexico, and I kind of knew where I wanted to go at the time. I knew I wanted to help people, and so I started my path on becoming a medical sales rep, and that's what I've been doing for the last over 27 years, working in the hospitals, and for the last 20, I've been helping put in pacemakers and defibrillators at the hospitals here around the state of New Mexico. So I'm in charge of a team of 6, and that's what we do 24/7. We just travel around the state, which is really nice, and which kind of goes into why I want to run for governor. Is because of my travels through business, I've met a lot of friends, and I have a lot of acquaintances all over the state. And, I've really seen people hurting this last year. And it's easy to sit on a soapbox, when you're campaigning for office and saying, well, I've been around the state. Well, I've been around it for 27 years, and I know these families or people who have started small businesses, or Wally and I were talking about restaurants, and where they no longer live in New Mexico, or their business of 30 years is now closed. And it really gets me, because I see how great New Mexico can be. And but for the last, what is it, over 90 years, we've elected the exact same people for the exact same office. And we are the definition of insanity. I truly believe that. And it really bothers me when politicians get on a soapbox, preach that they're going to fight for New Mexicans and they're going to be strong and they're always going to, be there for them. And all of a sudden they lose a primary or they lose a race, and then they just go vapor. It's just the way I was brought up, Paul, that if you're going to say something, then you ought to back it up and be a man of your word.
Now, you haven't mentioned one of the businesses that you're primarily associated with, which is Caliber's Guns, and talk about that business and how you got into it, and any philosophical impact. Of course, would lead one to believe that you would also be pro Second Amendment, but I don't want to jump to any conclusions here. This is interviewing you, not me making assumptions. So talk about that business.
Well, great. Well, great segue for that, by the way. Yeah. So I am one of the owners of Caliber's indoor shooting ranges. And we got into Calibers over, I believe, 15 years ago. They were looking to expand, and my wife and I were looking to invest. And because there was just a small little range on Holly, and so we decided that it was a good business venture. I'd always been pro Second Amendment. My wife was, her father was a huge hunter, a huge gun advocate, and also a big proponent of the Second Amendment. So when we got into Calibers, we helped them expand to the Cutler location. Also, we built the Coors location, and we have our third location now in Clovis, and we're looking to expand more in New Mexico. So, yes, I am a huge proponent of Second Amendment rights. I think that it is in the Constitution for a reason. We've seen evidence of when gun confiscation has gone on or red flag laws have gone awry. It's especially like when someplace like in Venezuela, I heard a lady give a speech who lived in Venezuela, and she talked about when they went and confiscated guns. And then she talked about the riots of a couple of years ago, and it was a very direct point. She goes, everybody thought it was great. It was going to help crime. She goes, all of a sudden they took all the guns, crime went rampant. And during the riots, the citizens of Venezuela were throwing rocks, but the government was throwing back bullets. And they just pushed down the whole cause of the riots in Venezuela. So I think every American has the right to own a firearm. I don't think the government should be involved in anybody, or how do I say that? When they want us to take account and inventory of every firearm we have, that's none of their business. Our government was not set up by the founding fathers to be so invasive in our lives. And as I kind of said in the paper, unless the governor of New Mexico has some way of rewriting the Constitution, I'm all for people exercising their Second Amendment rights. And also, as you know, last year when the governor decided she was going to close small businesses down, who she considered non-essential, we kept Calibers open. And we know it went national news, but I feel the same way today as I felt last time. I felt that my small business was essential, my employees were essential, and their paychecks were essential, and that she didn't have the right to try and close us down. We have a governor who's never, ever invested her own money in a small business. So she doesn't know what it takes to start one, to run one, and she wasn't going to look my employees in the eyes and tell them that they weren't essential. So that's why we stayed open also.
All right. Well, now you are just diving right into one of the main issues of concern with our current governor, and definitely want to expound on that a little bit. You're alluding to, of course, the lockdowns and COVID-19.
Yes.
Early on, especially when the governor was really micromanaging, if you will, the businesses that could stay open or not stay open. So let's kind of pull the lens back a little bit and talk
Sure.
about, generally speaking, the COVID policies of our governor. If you had been in that position at the time, how would you deal with it differently? And before I get that question fully out, how do you feel like if you are governor, would you fully endorse? Would you? What would your approach be to giving the legislature a seat at the table in future emergency declarations? Because obviously this governor put the kibosh on pretty obviously legislation in the 60-day session this year to give the legislature a seat at the table. So talk about that broadly speaking.
Absolutely. So, regarding the COVID shutdowns, I think that, well, first of all, I think all of her mandates and shutdowns are wrong. And the reason I feel that is that, I read the New Mexico Constitution, and nowhere in it does it say that she has the right to pick winners and losers in business. She calls herself an advocate for small businesses, but yet she wanted all of them to shut down. And as a result of that, we've lost 40% of our small businesses that'll never come back. But yet she allowed for the big box stores to stay open. And everybody saw how that went. It's just simple math. If there's 1,000 people that go into a big box store a day, which I know I'm way underestimating that, with all the big box stores we have in this state, that's over 1 million opportunities for cross-contamination and for infection of COVID. But she allowed them to stay open and to go on, while she wanted all of us to close down. But then she picked winners and losers also, because we know that her fiance at the time actually owned an independent body shop, and she allowed him to stay open. So she was telling everybody who was essential and who wasn't. So what would I do? I would follow the law. I heard a really good speech from Kristi Noem one time, and she was very humble. And what she said is that she goes, everybody thinks I did this fantastic thing and this amazing job with South Dakota. She's very humble, and she said, all I did was I just brought in the state attorneys, and I just went by what the Constitution allowed us to do. And she goes, and we didn't have the power to tell who was essential and to put unlawful mandates on the citizens of New Mexico, or I'm sorry, on the citizens of South Dakota, which it was a simplistic answer, but it was exactly what would have happened. And with her emergency powers, she's had them since last March. She forgot what she ran on, and she forgot what her position is. She's supposed to be the governor. She's not a tyrant or a queen. And we've talked to state legislatures, probably for like the last couple of weeks. They actually were in session, and they had the Democrat votes to take away her emergency powers. Well, all of a sudden there was a recess. Democrats go back into a room, they come back out, and next thing you know, she still has her emergency powers at this point. She's the only governor in the United States right now that has her emergency powers. So why does she have them, Paul? Because, I mean, what is it? It's just power. She's on a power trip right now, and she's making sure that people obey her. And that's not what this is supposed to be about. This is supposed to be about all of us. And, it's used all the time about we the people, but she's forgetting that it's actually we the people.
Yeah, according to the AARP, we are one of 7 states that has an indoor mask mandate currently in place. And that's quite honestly not too much of a deal to me, but it is a huge deal to me as a parent with 3 children in school, whether it's public or private school. All of them have to mask kids in school. I'm assuming that that's not a policy you would keep in place when you are governor?
No. I think at some point, and I've actually thrown this around about using it as a campaign logo, just common sense. And I think we've just thrown common sense out the window during COVID. Yes, children get COVID, and being in the healthcare industry, I've seen the horrors of COVID. But if they actually follow the science, when children get COVID, it's actually like a bad cold for them. And the fact that we are still masking our students, they're using scare tactics to keep these students just down right now. But the bad thing is, even in our educational system, they're indoctrinating our students that, well, the governor said this, the governor said that, and we have to do it. It's a mandate. So our students aren't even allowed to free think anymore, and I think that's wrong. You follow the example of states that have worked, and it's one of those situations where you hear on the radio, well, she's just trying to keep everybody safe. And, well, it's not her fault. She went through COVID. Well, guess what? 49 other governors went through COVID also. And why is it that we always end up on the bottom of everything when any, if it's COVID, economics, education, crime? And so, no, the answer to your question, is no, I would not mandate for masks to be on there. No, I would never mandate for you to close your business. I just think it's ridiculous because we are losing our freedoms right now, Paul. And as you know, and your listeners know, once the government takes a freedom away, they never give it back. They will never will. So that's where I will stand, that I will stand with the Constitution of New Mexico. I'll stand with the Constitution of the United States, and I will never shut this state down.
All right.
And I'll promise you that I will never shut this state down.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the other problems facing New Mexico, policies you might disagree with. I guess we can turn back to guns since we just kind of went over that. But
sure.
Obviously, there's been a lot of conversation about guns. And I know you said you're a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, but I assume that means that red flag laws and other infringements that we've seen passed recently, you would be not inclined to support that. You'd repeal them if you could, right?
Absolutely. The issue with red flag laws, and let me make my statement clear. I believe that if you can own a gun legally, you should be able to own a gun legally. The problem isn't with the legal gun owners; it's with the criminals, and the stolen guns, and what's happening with those firearms. Something we always focus on whenever there's a mass shooting. Well, why are we're focusing on the mass shooting, but why aren't we focusing on the mass shooter? There's a lot of legislation. I mean, there's also a lot of red flags. Let's say like on social media, but there's nothing anybody can do looking at social media. Like I don't want to give them any ID, but the mass shooter in Florida, they knew it. He actually had posted on Facebook that he would be a great mass shooter, and it's something about Columbine. Well, people like that shouldn't have guns. And I know it is a very thin line. And red flag laws, though, I don't understand them because let's just say, Paul, that your dog gets in trouble and you own a firearm and your neighbor hears you yelling at your dog, and she can actually call the police, complain about you, that you're a threat, and she felt threatened, and then they can come and take your gun. And then you have to go through the process and prove your innocence because they've already proved you guilty, and that's not right. We're getting to a point now where the government is getting so much control, and the Second Amendment is just it's an easy target for the progressives to take when they start going after guns. And I'll tell you what, something nice that's happened to us, Paul, though, is that so in Calibers, I've had so many people come up to me who you would think they'd be Republicans, but they've actually identified themselves as Democrats. And they're buying firearms right now because they're scared. They really are, because of this whole defund the police movement, the fact that we don't treat our men and women in blue with respect. So they're just looking for a way to protect themselves. And that's what owning a firearm should be about protecting yourself, about going hunting. If you want to go target shooting, it shouldn't be about the fact that if you're a gun owner, you're a villain and that you're this far-right psycho. It's just it's an easy target for progressives because it sells papers and it makes good news, and I don't think that's right.
All right, we're obviously at the Rio Grande Foundation mainly concerned about the economy and to an extent also the education system. So let's dive into some of those issues. We have one of the highest unemployment rates in the country. I think that's obviously partially due to COVID, but it's
right.
not a short-term issue. It's a long-term issue. Our
Yep.
workforce participation rate is not particularly high. We have a lot of people in New Mexico that for whatever reason don't join the workforce and get productive jobs. Any ideas on how to improve those kinds of things? I think some website named us one of the least hardworking states in the entire country recently as well. So do you see that as an issue? I know you're a native New Mexican and you see the hard work ethic of a lot of people, but obviously on the national level, we're not considered that by a lot of folks, and the numbers
Right.
kind of reflect that. So, what do you think about those issues?
Well, I think that with the leadership we have right now in Santa Fe, that they make it easy not to work. It's like I thought that was the most ridiculous thing I'd heard when she was offering $1,000 to go back to work or to get a job. My point is, why wasn't she offering $1,000 to the people who had jobs and who had worked all the way through COVID? We are actually incentivizing people to stay home. And why do they do that, Paul? They do that because they want to make sure that they can basically put a stranglehold on the citizens of this state and get them into a position where they have to vote Democrat or they have to vote for progressive ideas, because if not, they're going to lose their government check. New Mexico has an issue. We have a horrible gross receipts tax system here. We're overregulated. And here's a perfect example of why we can't get good paying jobs in this state. So about 14 years ago, the CEO of my company came here, and I'm very proud of this. We're the #1 territory in the nation. You wouldn't think we would be. You would think it'd be Dallas or Denver or, right, LA, the big cities. And he just came here just to see what we were doing right. And so we took him all around New Mexico, loved New Mexico. And I still remember the meeting. We were at El Pinto the night before he left, and we were going to build a new plant to build MRI-safe pacemakers. It was going to be the first plant in the world, the first devices in the world that could go through an MRI. And he wanted to put it here. And his exact quote to me is, "Why are we doing this in Minnesota?" He goes, "It's brutal in the winter. It's the summers are just as bad. We have a hard time. We're overregulated." And I said, "I don't know. Why aren't you?" So he actually proposed building the new plant in New Mexico around the Los Lunas, Albuquerque area. Calls me back about a week later and said they would never let me build a plant in New Mexico. You guys are overtaxed, overregulated. And he goes, "You guys are, you're first in crime and last in education." He goes, "I can't convince them to go there." So they put a plant in Tempe, Arizona with 100 six-figure jobs. And that's just story after story for everybody who has been here in New Mexico. If you remember, we used to have Siemens here. We used to have Motorola here. We used to have Philips here. And now we don't. Once again, we're just overtaxed and overregulated, and our governor should see that. And the problem is we're losing one of our best assets, Paul. We're losing our children. It's my sons. When my sons graduate from college, they would love to come back to New Mexico, but there's no opportunity here. So we're going to lose. I know we're going to lose my oldest son to Texas because there's opportunity for him there. My youngest son is going to Oklahoma Christian University right now. Why would he come back? But that's just, and I'm only one person. Imagine the other 2 million people in this state who sit here and look for a reason to stay. Perfect example. My wife coached varsity soccer. Last year, she lost the best female soccer player in the state because she wasn't allowed to play soccer, so they moved her to Texas because she was already getting recruited by colleges. That's New Mexico in a nutshell right there. And we're the definition of insanity. We do the same thing every 2 years when politicians come here. We expect for them to do something different, and they don't. And then we send them back to office.
Yeah. At the Rio Grande Foundation, when we look at economic policies, we often say, we have the weather. We're in the fastest growing part of the entire country, where we're surrounded by states that have double-digit population growth, decade on and decade off. But New Mexico struggles to grow, and the people that do come here are retirees. The people who leave tend to be our young people, as you just said. Now,
Right.
The gross receipts tax, the issue we have with that is, of course, that it taxes a lot of business inputs that are untaxed in other places. So when the
Right.
Rio Grande Foundation hires a podcast producer, we have to pay him a gross receipts tax
Right.
that he has to invoice us for, or our bookkeeper, or our accountant,
Exactly.
doctors, and all kinds of other people. Now, you're a businessman. Do you have any personal stories or kind of examples of the gross receipts tax's
Yes.
awfulness?
Well, yeah, exactly. So, and I'm sure your audience knows this, but it's so ridiculous that New Mexico, our gross receipts tax is actually put in because we want to tax people for the pleasure of doing business in New Mexico. if you're from out of state. And as you guys know, we're one of the only states that our gross receipts tax on businesses can hit you twice. It can hit you you pay gross receipt tax on material, and then you also get hit again on construction. And it's if we don't address this overregulation and overtaxing of the citizens and corporations that want to come here, we will never ever attract good corporate jobs to this state. And you just said it, Paul. We have beautiful weather. We have a great climate. We have a workforce that wants to work. But why would they want to come to New Mexico? And to your point, when you look at Texas is thriving. I mean, Tesla just left California and is going to Texas. Oracle going. So yes, they're coming to New Mexico, but they're only using our highway to get across New Mexico to Texas. Arizona is booming. When you're talking about stagnant growth, both in population too, we've been stagnant when you have Arizona is growing in double digits, and you have big corporations like medical corporations that are putting complexes in place in Arizona. It's just, we have to change something, Paul. And as a businessman, I see this every day, just how our tax structure and overregulation, it's just, they don't make New Mexico competitive for businesses to come here. And why would they? And it's evident because we're not getting them here.
And we have a unprecedented budget surplus facing the state of New Mexico in January. Unfortunately, you won't be governor just yet, no matter what happens, because there is no gubernatorial election until November of 2022.
Right.
So we're about a year out from this election, but who knows what could happen between now and next November, let alone next January, so January of 2023. But if you were, say, governor of New Mexico heading into this session, estimates were that there was a $1.4 billion surplus. So last budget was 7.4.
Yes.
They're looking at 8.8. Based on the events since that estimate was made, everybody's in an energy crisis. Oil and gas keep growing and growing in their prices and production. I think New Mexico could be sitting on a budget surplus approaching $2 billion. Oh, yeah. What other kinds of policies would you consider doing with that money besides or in addition to the gross receipts tax reform?
Well, I'll tell you what, you keep the surplus going. Everybody knows where it's at, where it's coming from. It's coming from oil and gas, right? And so you don't bite the hand that feeds you. And nobody wants dirty air and water. But the fact of the matter is that the one thing we have going right now in this state is oil and gas. And if you remember, Joe Biden, one of his first executive orders was he banned fracking on government lands, and there was no pushback from New Mexico. It took her, I think, 78 days to even say anything about it, and both our senators said nothing about it. They loved the idea, right? And then we were going to be the world leader in clean energy jobs. Well, I'm sorry, unless I've missed something, I haven't seen a lot of windmill factories or solar panel factories going up in this state. And so, we need to keep that surplus going, but we need to spend it wisely. And I think that's something I do bring to the table is that when you run a business, you know how to put together a real budget. And when you don't have the money, you don't go over budget, but you start targeting for projects. You have to, because of the fact is that this New Mexico government and state legislature is so used to spending money they don't have, but then they know it's going to be replenished, right? Because you pay taxes, I pay taxes, everybody pay taxes, and this is what happens when people go into office and they don't know how to do a budget, or when they start making laws that overregulate businesses from succeeding. You have to, sometimes we're going to have to meet in the middle of this, and right now we're not. Everything's being pushed left. So what the first thing I would do on taxes is, so you asked me, and just a couple of my plans is that we're going to revamp the whole gross receipts tax in this state to make it advantageous for businesses to want to come here. I don't really believe, actually I don't believe that we ought to be taxing Social Security benefits. Most of the people taking Social Security have already paid their fair share. And, that term gets thrown around all the time. I mean, why are we double dipping? We're one of only 13 states that are doing that. And what I do for a living is I build companies, and that's what I've done, and that's what companies hire me to do. And I would personally go out, and I'm not kidding. I would personally go out and talk to the Teslas of the world, or the Fords, or the Toyotas, and just sell New Mexico. Sell the benefits of doing business in New Mexico, selling the attributes of all the people in New Mexico. And we don't have that right now. And you know what? And I would fight for oil and gas industries. I understand that we saw on the Journal the other day about, well, oil producers are flaring all over the place with methane. And yeah, if that's an issue, then I'll tell you what, then let's work with our independent oil operators to capture this methane. And why aren't we selling it? Because methane is natural gas, and we can process this. So not only will we get the benefits of the oil revenues, we could also get the benefits of the natural gas revenues. And they have so much of natural gas down there that this could be a boom for New Mexico, and we can invest more in our education systems. We can invest more in our, in our actual infrastructure. Something I will say is I do believe in infrastructure, though, Paul. I do, but cause traveling the roads of New Mexico, they really need to be fixed. But, one thing goes with another. You have a healthy industry that's providing surplus and revenues to the state. Why can't we build a broadband system for the state of New Mexico and help our children? Why can't we invest in our roads, or why can't we invest in corporate centers the way Arizona has and Texas has, and we actually invest back in New Mexico and we bring these companies in here? Because at the end of the day, if New Mexicans are working, it helps everybody, including all of our tax revenues. And this way, we don't have to raise taxes on New Mexicans who are overtaxed.
So when we talk about infrastructure, the Biden administration, unfortunately, has kind of used that term in such broad ways that it has very little meaning. What do you mean by infrastructure? You mentioned roads and broadband. Do you see other applications for that term, or is that generally, maybe water projects or something? Is that what you're physically talking about, physical infrastructure projects?
Yes, yeah. I'm talking about, I'm not talking about go happy, everybody's, loving infrastructure like the Biden administration is, which I just think is just it's an endless hole that they just keep dumping money on that thinks, and they're doing it for votes. We know why they're doing it. So I'm talking about real infrastructure, yes, about actually getting the roads done right in this state. If anybody who's gone through Bernalillo, and I know you all have, the fact that we don't hold our contractors to a dateline and the terms of their bids is ridiculous. It's been 2 years on that one little section through Bernalillo. Mm-hmm. But the problem with government is that they take bids, and then everybody has their hand in it. And if you always have an end date on a build, you always do. But New Mexico will just keep paying it because they know they can charge the state government, and we'll keep paying it. It's like, oh, well, yeah, we know you're 7 months overdue when you said you would finish it, but we'll give you $750,000 if you can, if you can finish it in another 6 months rather than the 6 months you told us that it would take. And I do believe in water projects, and this is why I do cover the state of New Mexico, and I cover a lot on the Navajo Nation. And for real infrastructure, when we could actually build solar power water wells and solar power pumps in some of these places, we could really help out the community. And that's what I'm talking about, infrastructure, broadband for our kids. And we can do that for education. Let's just say my son, when the one thing is, we actually put my son in a charter school. He got a computer, and his computer was locked out to only schoolwork, and that's it. And we have such a bad educational system here that why wouldn't we invest back in our children? Not in a point where we're just giving free money away, but things that we could actually see an endpoint and help the community of New Mexico. And I do see what you mean about infrastructure gets thrown away, but when I'm talking about infrastructure, I'm talking about real infrastructure. I'm not talking about, where we're giving money. I could go on about just all the crap that this new bill is on.
Right.
So that's what I mean by infrastructure.
Fair enough. And I'll just make sure you're aware that in addition to using some resources, which we obviously have to fund infrastructure, New Mexico has a very onerous Davis-Bacon law on the books, which is a giveaway to the trades where you essentially have inflated wages being paid on roads, bridges, schools.
Exactly.
So you get a lot less of that money. Now, I would kind of pair that with a right to work law, which simply says that you can't force people to join a union or pay the union dues as a precondition of employment, not necessarily in the trades, but for private sector workers. Are those issues that you would support in terms of labor reform in New Mexico?
Yeah, I do think we need labor reform. And one of the biggest things I think we need labor reform is, and I know I'm going to hear about this, is with the teachers union. I've talked to so many teachers in this state where, and I believe right now, only 50% of the teachers belong to the union. And listen, my father was a union member down at the Journal for 35 years. And he was a big advocate on the fact where he goes, why am I paying union dues when my union does nothing for me or anybody in the at the Journal? And that was a true statement by him. I understand why unions came around way back when the Industrial Revolution was coming on, but we can fix that. And how we do it is if there's always a fair wage with industry, but when government gets involved and starts telling, especially let's talk about small businesses, when they start telling us that we have to pay, $18 an hour, $15 an hour, or then that really hurts us because we have to put the price somewhere. We do have to pay. It's just not all profit for small businesses. Small businesses, we have to pay mortgages, we have to pay insurance, we got to pay capital. And we're not Walmart or Target where we have these billion-dollar budgets. Most small businesses, as you know, only have a 60 to 90-day slush fund. And so when we get forced to pay for leave that the legislation just did, that hurts us. When we get forced to pay a specific wage, that hurts us. And the reason it does is because all of a sudden, instead of going with 20 employees in the day, we have to cut back for 15 because we have to pay our mortgages and insurance also. And, nothing comes without a price, Paul. Nothing does. But even with these state contracts, we have to start holding people's feet to the fire, and we have to make these contracts fair. You shouldn't be getting a $1 million state contract because, your padrino's nephew needs a job and he owns a small construction company. And we have so much waste in this state. And we have so much revenue coming in. We could probably get this state back on its feet in a couple of years. I've heard a couple of candidates, well, we can do it within a year. I think that's just kind of impossible because I'm a realist. But if we all work together and the state legislature will actually get on board rather than thinking, about their next promotion or their next assignment, if they follow the lines, and I really think we could help this state, Paul. I do. And as you know, all business owners and even big corporations, we just want fair rules to do business in. It's not rocket science. And right now that's not happening. So, the old saying, what did Reagan say? Keep taxes low and regulations down, then, the business will, or the machine will succeed. So that's how I would govern this state.
All right. Well, we have just a few minutes left, and you jumped into the education situation. So let's expand upon that a little bit, because New Mexico's education system has a lot to be desired, and that's before the COVID-19, the year of lost in-person schooling, all of the challenges that we've faced, lack of accountability. Talk about your views on education policy and the K-12 system. What needs to be done?
Well, you know what? I think we need to go back and let just teachers teach. I think that, I believe that we need to follow how our teachers feel our students need to be taught. And what I mean by that is that teachers shouldn't feel threatened by a union because they will not follow the union's line. One of the first things I will do is with my Secretary of Education, I will make sure that they live in this state. Okay, and we're also going to let the counties actually dictate their educational needs because, as we know, the kids in Albuquerque, if they're on a program, well, that program may not work in Floyd or Las Cruces or Tucumcari. And so we need to give power to these school boards, and we need to give powers back to the teachers. But most of all, we need to give powers away from the unions, and we need to give power back to the teachers and the principal because they are on the front lines with this. New Mexico, as you know, spends more money on each student than almost anywhere in the nation with the worst results. It's I found out from talking to so many teachers around this state, one of the big things they would like to do is that they'd really love to go away from the one time a year park tests because that takes a whole week for the students to do. And what they'd like to do is that they'd actually said it would benefit us if we would test our students, smaller tests, at the beginning of the year, right during Christmas break, and then at the end of the year, because we could get real data points on progress. We could actually get see real numbers on how we're doing. And, and that's what we need. We need to know what's working and what's not working. Right now, a whole bunch of stuff is not working. As long as we keep going with this, one model fits all, then our students are gonna suffer. We have one of the lowest high school graduation rates in the nation. We have, a couple of the teachers I talked to. It's like we get students who are in the fourth grade that can't read at a first grade level, but we just keep passing them on. We keep passing them on. A lot of teachers are in the known that if we were to that they know which student is going to excel and which one needs more time. We can't be afraid to hold our students back at the very beginning just so they can succeed in the future. And one of my big things is CRT will never be taught in New Mexico. And because I've seen it firsthand, I truly have, because being a person of color, and my dad was Mexican, my mom's Spanish, my parents never brought me up that I was a victim. And the fact of the matter is that with our governor and the new PED that's coming out, that they are teaching students of color that they're victims and they're going to have a hard time in this life and that there's some boogeyman that's keeping them down, I just think is ridiculous. We ought to be educating our students and not indoctrinating them. Because if you go by the scenario they're teaching our students, Paul, right now, is that they're trying to say that my sons have been oppressed by my wife, who's Anglo. No, right. I'm being yeah, and we shouldn't be teaching kids of color that the student sitting right next to them, just because their name happens to be Jones or Smith, that they're oppressing them. That's just ridiculous. They preach equality and unity, and we all need to come together, but yet every single day, the progressives in the media are dividing us as people, and that's just wrong.
Now, last question before
Yes.
we conclude on that issue. You didn't mention school choice yet. That doesn't mean that you oppose it. I just wanted to get your thoughts on school choice and that as a means of addressing our educational challenges.
No, thank you for bringing that up, because that is big for me, Paul, and because it hit me personally. So, my son, we had him in APS public school, and he was not doing well. My son had an issue with hearing. He had hearing problems until he was 2. And so we knew that he was a little behind. And so we had him in public school, and it wasn't working. We tried to put him in private school. It wasn't working. So my wife homeschooled, and then we ended up taking him to a charter school right behind, at Next Gen, right behind Del Norte, where he thrived. He just thrived, and today he's a junior in college. I believe that if you're paying property tax, it's your money, and that money should follow your child. And parents should have the choice of where their kids go to school. There should. It's not. It's interesting. It's, if you want to get better at something and in business, then you got to make yourself competitive. And what it's going to do, school choice will make schools get competitive. They're not going to just be passing kids along, and all of a sudden Johnny gets out of the 12th grade and can't read at a 6th grade level. So I'm 100% behind school choice, because I've seen how it works and how good it works. And especially now that so many parents are getting involved with their parents' education because they saw what happened during COVID and they saw what their kids were getting taught by the APS system and around the state during COVID. Absolutely. I feel it's your money, it's your child. You should decide where your student goes.
All right. Thank you very much for your time today, Louie.
Absolutely.
How do people find out more about your campaign?
Well, they can get a hold of me at louiesanchezforgovernor.com. So that's louiesanchezforgovernor.com. And please go on our website, and we're on Facebook also. And as a lot of people know, I'm actually a candidate that answers a lot of questions. That's one thing about being a businessman. You're not doing business unless you're answering your phone and you're answering people's questions. So, and I've actually found that out too, where people are like, wow, I can't believe you actually asked them my question. Well, I think we should. If you're running for office, you should be accountable, and people should ought to be able to get a hold of you.
Excellent. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.
Thank you all.